afternoon again. If you've just joined us, I see lots of people just popping on. My name's Katie Katapodis, and it's my great pleasure to be facilitating the state of ethics and the public relations industry in Africa. In my mind, this is such an important conversation at a very important moment. I am not a PR person. In fact, I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist. I've been an editor-in-chief for many, many years, going over 2 decades. And so there's a wonderful intersection of the world of media and the world of public relations that happens constantly, which is why I am so pleased to be facilitating the session today and so pleased to have you with us on this Friday, wherever in the world you may be. We're going to run until about 2 p.m. and that is South African time, 2 p.m. It's 4 minutes past 1 at the moment. Allow me to introduce our panelists, our very esteemed panelists. I'll give a high-level introduction and then I'll go through and let everybody give us a bit of a thought starter and give us their sense of the topic. But beginning with Dustin Chick, partner and managing director at Razor PR. He is also the PRCA Africa Ethics and Practices Network Chair. Good afternoon and welcome, Dustin. Bridget Van Holt, co-market leader and managing director at BCW Africa, and of course our PRCA Africa Ethics and Practices Network. Ariq Karani, who finds himself in a very interesting place in the world. I think he said it's 6:30 in the morning where he is. He is the president of APRA and president of the Public Relations Society of Kenya. And Raheen Leroux, founder and managing director at Reputation Matters and founder at Rebag Reuse. So as you can see this afternoon, we've got such a wonderful and esteemed panel with us. So hello to all of our panelists.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Katie.
Good day.
Let us start with some high-level thought starters, just in terms of what we're doing today. Our topic is such a fundamental point. We're talking about the state of ethics and the public relations industry in Africa. So Dustin, as the network chair, let me start with you. Give me just a sense of ethics and PR. Can the two coexist?
I don't think that's a question. I think it's non-negotiable. And I think that ethics and PR is probably our most important challenge and our most important opportunity as an industry. I think we sit at a place where we deal with the giving and receiving of information every day, and the role that we play around how we treat that information, how we respect the quality of that information, the accuracy of that information is a fundamental deal breaker, I think, to the future of who we are as an industry. And then equally, the role we have with our people, whether we work directly in agencies or we work more on the corporate side, there is a role that communicators play in holding a bit of a mirror, I guess, to the organizations that they represent and the people they represent to do things properly.
Dustin, what is your view of misinformation in this day and age of AI and the way it's proliferating our world?
Katie, it actually petrifies me, if I'm really honest. And maybe I sound a bit old when I say that. My kids might have a different view. But the reality is, I think it's the era of the unknown that worries me more than the known. And I think it's the ability for something where I think as humanity we can lose control very quickly of where this may go. And I worry that in the race to invent and lead, that we're not necessarily bringing the policies, processes, structures, governance that's required with us.
Bridget Van Holt, if we come to you now, if I say to you, Bridget, when we say the state of ethics and the PR industry in Africa, what do you believe that state is currently?
I was actually very, I was surprised and I welcomed the fact that between the research that was done in 2023 and the research done in 2024, that there is an improvement in the state of ethics across Africa. And I think Dustin said it's actually, it's an imperative. The PR profession has to behave and act in an ethical way. And I think that with the fact that there's an increasing digital way of communicating, and it is so, and we're so quick and need to respond in that 24/7 environment, I think very quickly we can be caught up in behavior and tactics that may not be ethical. And one has to be extremely conscious of how we react, what we say, who we say it to, where we're saying it, and to maintain that ethical practice as a PR professional. I think that within Africa, there's a personal dilemma and there's a corporate dilemma, but I think both of them are key in terms of where Africa is in the state of ethics on the continent.
Thank you, Bridget. If you've just joined us, my name's Katie Catapodis. I'm moderating the State of Ethics and Public Relations Industry in Africa this Friday afternoon, and we are thrilled to have everybody here. I know that we had over 120 people registered for this particular webinar, and that is fantastic. If you've got any questions, allow me to remind you to please pop your questions into the Q&A box, and we'll populate that and then ask all of our esteemed panelists. Allow me now to go to Arik Karani, the president of APRA and president of the Public Relations Society of Kenya. Arik, if I say to you, ethics on our continent when it comes to public relations, are we sitting, do you believe that the PR industry is sitting in a strong or in a slightly weakened position?
That's very interesting. I think, first of all, we are in an era where it's so brilliant and so nice to be African. There's so much that the continent is giving at this particular level. And where we are, I think public relations and communication has to step up the game and provide more for organizations. Now, to answer your question in terms of what I feel ethics and PR in the continent has reached, I think that, first of all, we have to look at it this way. Ethics in PR is all about being truthful, being transparent, and being accountable in everything that we communicate. Truthful in terms of the messaging, transparent in terms of you're not withholding anything, accountable in terms of you can defend whatever you have put out there. While we do this in communication, we also have to understand that we have to respect people's rights and the privacy that they hold. I think where we have reached, PR should help professionals, should help CEOs, should help organizations to behave responsibly and ethically. I think that where we've reached also, it's a point where we must serve as ethical counselors to all of this dynamic group of people, organizations, and individuals. That's where our strong suit is. So it's very exciting to be African, but also it is exciting to be PR and communication professionals within the continent of Africa. But that excitement comes with a lot of responsibilities. And I think the discussion today is going to be very exciting for us to figure out how do we forge forward? Because I always look for, yes, the research findings are here, but where do we go from here? How do we perfect where the continent has reached? How do we become more transparent, more accountable? How do we set the standards and the bar a little bit higher? And so I'm pretty much excited for that.
Forging forward, I really like that, Arik. Let's speak to Raheen Leroux now. Raheen, your thoughts on the way forward for the industry when it comes to PR and ethics.
So Reputation Matters, just as a quick background, has been doing the measuring APRA and PRCA's ethics in the PR landscape for the past 5 years. And we included the PR and landscape in the last 2 years. And I think a key thing that we need to look at is when we measure it, we look at it at an individual, company, and country level. And absolutely looking at it, you have to be ethical on all of those levels. But I think what's even more important, having a look at the research side of things, the ethics and the PR landscape isn't mutually exclusive. So one of the things that I did find a little bit worrying, and this is also leading from last year's research, and I think it's an industry problem around the globe, is that 45% of our respondents indicated they don't have a space around the boardroom table. And I think that's a very, very important aspect to touch on. If we want to build ethical companies, ethical countries, We need those ethical individuals that have the PR and communication expertise to be able to build those companies.
How do we resolve that? How do we get those ethical individuals, Regine, around the boardroom table?
See, we also saw 30% of the respondents being seen as seeing their inputs as being important. CEOs are relying on their inputs, but it's still too reactive. So too often PR professionals are being called on when there's a crisis, when an event needs to be arranged to try and do goodwill because of a dire scenario. It's to raise our voices. It's to be able to speak in a language that speaks to people around the boardroom table. And what we often see is the people around the boardroom table speak in numbers. So we as PR professionals, as communicators, are storytellers. It's to get that story out there. The boardroom don't want to listen to stories, unfortunately. Numbers, they want facts. So a big, crucial part of the future of PR, of communication, is research, to help communicators to speak in numbers, to put value to their value that they contribute to the organization and the industry.
Bridget, do you think enough research is being done in the industry? If we're going to just attach to what Regine said there, are we doing enough?
So I don't think we are. I think that this research that PRCA is doing and APRA is doing, I think is a great step in the right direction. But I do have two queries. One is, so how do we measure how effective we are from an ethical point of view? How do we measure that? And the second would be, so what are the reporting structures? What are the implications if somebody is not, or a company is not performing ethically? So what are those measurement what is the measurement structure, and what is that reporting structure? Does that person just get struck off the roll? Or is it just simply a membership from a professional body that is cancelled? Or does that person continue getting new business and continuing on their professional career as if nothing else has happened? Just a little reprimand? Not really. So what are we doing, and how are we going to actually implement those reporting structures, and how are we going to ensure that somebody is actually reprimanded effectively and not allowed to operate in the industry if that is the way that they're performing?
Dustin, I want to come to you very quickly. What happens in a scenario where a PR company, someone doing PR, takes on a client in very good faith, only for some of that client's work later down the line, once contracts have been signed and sealed and the work has been done, to emerge as unethical? What should the role of the agency be in that instance?
You know, Katie, it's actually quite a simple answer, because doing the right thing is always the right thing. And if you have that as a pretty strong North Star in both how you conduct yourself, how you engage your clients, types of clients you're willing to do business with, the answer is very simple. The relationship with the client needs to end, because it is no more complicated than that. Because if you're willing to brush over or just, paraphrase what the thing looks like, then quite honestly, you are a massively disingenuous organization. You're doing the opposite of what we're telling people to do. To use Eric's words, transparency. There's no transparency in that. There's no accountability in that. And sometimes hard decisions must be made. And sometimes, and often, those hard decisions come with cost. But if you're willing to champion ethics as a strong pillar of how we conduct ourselves, not just as individual businesses, but as a whole industry, then you must live with the hard decision that sometimes it will cost you money. And it's hard because we all have shareholders and we all have, bills to pay and those kind of things. But you have to decide the journey, I guess, you're willing to live on. And just to add a little bit to what Bridget was saying earlier, it's not just even in the reporting lines and how you call out those organizations. It's being clear about what is acceptable and what is not, and making that public and available and crystal clear. And then in that, you cannot give so much as an inch on what that guideline looks like. And it sounds quite black and white, but actually it is quite black and white. Either you are ethical or you are not. End of discussion.
We live in tough economic times. There is no doubt that the world's economy is taking a little bit of a knock and people are finding it very hard. What do you say, Eric, to those who might argue the counterpoint of what Dustin told us, to say, well, you know, ethics don't pay the rent. And if I've got a client who's prepared to pay and I've got a bond and rent and salaries to pay, are we prioritizing the bottom line over ethics? And what happens in a scenario like that? What's your advice to them?
It's very interesting where the world is right now. And I think when we talk of the economics of the situation, we have to realize that one of the critical elements that happens during these tough times is that PR and communications budgets are the ones that are easily, quickly cut. They are cut above the rest. And so I always say, how do we defend the right to control having those budgets, because the budgets now talk the story of the organization or the individual or the brand. So I always believe that we have to really fight for budgets to either not be cut or to be increased for us to be able to communicate effectively. That said, even as we do that, we have to ensure that we are still ethical in all our ways. And I feel with this research, what we are getting to the point is that the future of communication right at this point is rebuilding the trust and fighting disinformation, rebuilding trust in terms of our ethical approaches, fighting disinformation, because that's what is happening in the world right now. When you look at the future of communications and we look at the economic budget, it means that we have to require creative ways of getting the message across to audiences. Even as we are creative in getting that message, we have to be making sure we are ethical in our ways of doing that. So I look at it in terms of getting the message across ultimately comes down to repairing trust through transparency and through responsibility. Because look at it this way, we have to be ethical in all our practices. We have a lot of things that are coming up right now, disinformation, misinformation, and those are the biggest factors that will hinder our approach to work moving forward. So how do we address that? What does the future action look like? And I think the future of communications will require increased efforts to combat misinformation and disinformation, to remain relevant and ethical. But then we will also have a lot of work to do in terms of rebuilding trust and fighting disinformation. As we think of budgets, we still have to continue defending them and ensuring that we, as we sit on the table, whether at the agency level, organizational level, is that we represent the value of saying the budget has to be increased because we're telling the story of the organization, of the brand that is important to get across to people and to the public.
I'd like to remind all of our participants today to please send us their questions. You'll see the Q&A box underneath, so please feel free to populate that. And if you've just joined us, you're watching our discussion on the state of ethics and the public relations industry in Africa. We have a question from Alexandra Kale. I hope, Alexandra, I've spelled or pronounced your surname correctly. And the question is, what strategies can we as PR professionals do to ensure that we remain accountable to maintaining high standards of PR ethics in the industry? Raheen, can I give that to you?
Yeah, sure. So I think that's a really great question, Alex. And I think one of the key things is that is why there are industry associations and institutions. So, for example, the PRCA, APRA, PRCA, they are all interlinked and they all have a code of ethics and learning from each other. It's not just about linking fellow South Africans, but it's linking fellow Africans together, because what is ethics? What is ethics? What is ethical in one country or regarded as unethical in one country could be regarded as totally the opposite in another country. So it's to get to have that governance in place. And I think a massive part of ethics is respect. It's respect for self, respect for others, and respect for other cultures and other countries and how they do things. So one of the very, very interesting conversations, we've just actually, Eric, Bridget, and myself have returned from Cote d'Ivoire, and we had the APRA conference there last week. And one of the very interesting conversations that was held there was a lady from Ghana was sharing her story of when you go and do business or you want to launch a project in one of the communities, you have to slaughter a goat in that specific community as part of a sign of respect. So for some industries, for some countries, that could be totally unheard of. But what they have done as a country is they have stipulated the guidelines, the processes of how to do that, so that it is done ethically, it's done transparently, it's done with authenticity. So to again respect the culture of that country in that way. And I think that's where it all comes together. And I think that's the role that we all have to play as PR practitioners, as experts, is to share that knowledge. And we can't do that in isolation. We have to do that as industry bodies, institutions, so that we can lay that foundation, that groundwork, what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and build from there.
Dustin and I have often joked, and in fact, I think it's a bit more serious than a joke, that we'll write a book one day, two sides of the same coin, PR on the one side, journalism on the other side. I did want to bring my journalism into this, because PR is one thing, spin is something else. How do you describe, as PR professionals and representing the industry, how do you describe the difference between PR and Eric, you speak about being transparent and accountable, and then spin, which often happens in the realm of politics and when talking to and about politicians. Eric, do you want to take a go at that? Have a go at that?
That's very, very, very interesting. I think when we are talking about the spin and the level of spin, we have to look at it differently. Building on what Raheen said in terms of cultural communication and looking at it differently, I look at it in terms of high context culture and low context culture. Now, as I look at it that way, I realize one thing. High context culture, the communication there has to be one where the style is based on body language, tone, overall context. And then low context culture is straightforward. So when I look at the level of transparency, accountability, and how to move forward, I kind of think that even if we're looking at how transparent and ethical the situation should be, we should ensure that our communication to the culture that we are marketing or discussing with is appropriate. So I don't look at it that much as spin. I look at it as how do we target the best to get the best out of the different cultures or contexts that we are communicating in.
Fair enough. We've got quite a few questions coming through, so let me go to those. Loth Makuza says, working with a brand that doesn't care about ethical issues, if you strive to be ethical in all aspects as a communication specialist, you get fired or you see the budget cut in your department. What are good ways to survive from this chaos ethically? Bridget?
I suppose that gets back to what I was saying earlier. How do we measure ethics, and what are those reporting structures? Because it's not actually the PR professional is in this case is looking after his or her job, and they are being told to do things that potentially are not within their own values, their own personal values. And that must be so hard as a person from an individual point of view, because I mean, the research is telling us that from an individual personal point of view, our values are right up there from an ethical behavior point of view. So it must be very difficult to be in this environment. But I wonder whether there aren't ways of reporting unethical behavior to their own regulatory bodies, to their own associations within the industry that they're operating, whether there isn't some kind of a whistleblowing environment a Deloitte or an ENCA, Ernst & Young have various whistleblowing opportunities, whether there isn't an opportunity to be able to report to the company. But potentially then that person is also at stake from their own job point of view. It is about measurement and what are the stakes, and you know, what does it mean? What's going to happen to me? But can I sleep at night? Would be very important to me that I'm behaving in that ethical way.
Thank you, Bridget. Dustin, I'm going to give you this next question. It says, do we have a universal laid down PR rule, regulations and norms for all PR persons and PR bodies to adhere to? If yes, how are these implemented across the board?
If you could just indulge me for a second, I wanted to add something to Bridget's comment as well. I couldn't agree more. It's about the whistleblower. But actually, when we talk true ethics, it's the efforts we take as organizations to protect those whistleblowers. So it absolutely talks about the organization's welcoming of that behavior, because that already talks about an ethos that lives in it. And then the last point I wanted to make there was just that if you feel that strongly, you should probably go to the police. Again, doing the right thing is not that hard. You just do the right thing. But to answer your question, as members of the PRCA, as agencies and who belong, we sign up to a code of conduct. And that code of conduct provides us with some pretty universal guardrails in terms of acceptable and non-acceptable behaviors. My feeling is always that that's the very minimum that you need to kind of go down the road on. But in that is, and actually it's a question that Bridget and I have often spoken about offline with each other, is what do we do to call out members or organizations who are not members of these professional bodies? And do we have an obligation as members of those professional bodies to go, hey, buddy, that's not so great, and actually call that out? So that I think is a whole separate conversation. But a good place to start is to actually look on the PRCA website. There's very strong guidelines in terms of that code of conduct. It's publicly available. That's in itself is an ethical thing, code of conduct being publicly available. And then I think you have to stop and look at yourself, because in every single moment here, there is a personal responsibility that comes to play. And you cannot talk about the systems and the processes and the things that live external to you if you're not willing to live by your own ethical compass. And I know this is a very philosophical conversation, but that compass has to steer you in all those decisions. Like, do I go to the police because I feel as strongly as I do about this? Like, do I phone the Hawks in a South African context? Do I go to a Deloitte or an EY? Or does my organization have reporting structures that I'm allowed to access? And it begins really quite simply with the best possible rule that I can give anybody. It starts with you. And if you are willing to live ethically and you're willing to stand up against things that you believe are not ethical, the rest of it should be pretty simple.
And I imagine a good value system. If you've got a strong value system and something doesn't align with your values, then you know that something's wrong. Arik, this next one is for you from Sheila Williams. How can the industry cultivate a culture of integrity and accountability to address the ethical issues raised in the report, especially with technology changing so much in the way that we work?
I think the issue of integrity starts from within ourselves. And it starts from an individual choice. Because if you conduct yourself in ways of high integrity, then your work will show for it. And so I start by looking internally and figuring out how can I be ethical and how can I do my business or how can I do my work in a way that improves and showcases integrity. If I'm able to do that, then I also influence the C-circle because they know that Arik and his work has to be at a certain level and standard. And so it will influence the work you give. It will influence the various managers and team members who are on the table with you. And it will influence the entire chain of the organization, the employees, the work, if it's an agency, the work you put out to clients. So it has to start from within. If you lose that focus from your point of view, and if you can be swayed by the wind wherever it goes, people will not respect you. Your work will not be respected. Your organization will not be believed or be respected or be trusted. Everything falls in terms of the choice that you make as an individual. So I would start the conversation with internally, what does that make it feel for you? Or what do you want to see yourself, your work, your organization, the influence circle that you have? How do you want it to be seen by the world? Then if you want to be seen in a certain way, then you will be able to be more ethical with high integrity in everything that you do.
Thank you very much, Arik. Rahim, we've got a question from, I think it's Neil Duplessis, saying, do you see ethics as different from the viewpoints of consultants versus internal practitioners working in the corporate communication function of a big company? And how do you act as ethical counsel to your client versus to your employer with hiring and firing power?
So Nilki, thank you for that question. I think it's a really great question. I think if we have a look, if we can actually just boil it down to what we learn in Communications 101, communications or public relations, it's about building mutually beneficial relationships. It's to build goodwill for all stakeholders. So your internal, your consultants, for external, for internal, there shouldn't be a difference. It's all about building those relationships, long-term relationships. So I think what's really, really key, and it links to what Dustin was just saying, what Arik was saying, it starts within. For yourself, for a business, it starts with your core values. And what are those core values? And it's not just having beautiful posters on the walls and coming back from a strategy session and everyone's decided, okay, these are our values. It has to be in your DNA and in your daily behavior, what you think, how you do things, because with that consistency, that builds trust, that builds your reputation. And whether you, and that also links last to your question, yes, in terms of reporting that to the authorities. If you are very clear on your own value system, on your own, what you will accept ethically, you want to work and you will resonate with other people and companies that you want to work with because you share the same values. So it should then not be, I want to say it shouldn't be difficult, but it is difficult to fire a client if you do not resonate with their values. Yes, it's not nice. You never want to say, I mean, within when economies aren't that great, you don't want to say no to work, but you cannot compromise your values. Short-term gain isn't going to be a long-term solution. So I think that is really, really crucial when it comes to that is having your values as a cornerstone, internal, external. So then letting people go, having those values to make those decisions will be a lot easier.
I want us to turn our attentions now to something that is, I think, consuming many of us in many different industries. Some would argue it's creating havoc. Others would argue that it's adding value. AI. How do we incorporate AI into the work that you do as PR executives in your agencies, as communications experts? Should you incorporate AI into it? And do you have a responsibility to tell the world and tell your client that you're using it? Dustin, I saw you nodding. Over to you.
You know, in January of last year, we all came back to the office after the December shutdown, and everybody was talking about AI. It was 2023's version of the metaverse, and the conversation was how quickly can we adopt AI in our business? And fundamentally, it goes back to that compass again. That was the wrong question, because the right question was, how do we do so responsibly? What are the guardrails that we have in place for us and our clients that say we are doing things in the right way? So I can speak for my own agencies. We actually, our point was to create a policy around it. We looked at things like privacy of data. We looked at things like complementary versus creative ability. So is it doing the work for you, or are you using it to complement your work? I don't think AI is going to go away. So I think you've got to learn to work around it. But also things like you can't tell a client, I've got an X type of resource who's got 20 years experience in Y, and then get a computer to do it. That's unethical in its own nature. And I think it talks to your own compass in that. And I'm happy to share a copy of that policy afterwards. It is available to everybody. But, you know, things like, does it take into account things like hate speech and racial and societal norms? You know, we know that for the longest time, it was AI was did face recognition on Caucasian men. Okay, that's like this much of the global population. Does that make it ethical or unethical in terms of generative ability and stuff like that? So to kind of come back to the question, AI is not going anywhere. In fact, it's going to get worse, I would say. And it's going to get a lot worse, I think, before it gets a lot better. And I think it comes down to us again as individuals. And I sound like I'm bleating the same message every time, but it's true. What is your intention behind AI? Are you doing it because you're a bit lazy and you're just trying to scrape off a little bit and get your work done while you tell your client how clever you are? Not all that ethical. Are you doing it because you think it can add significant creative value and a generative ability to the creative assets that you're producing for your clients? Different chat. Are you doing it to do your research? Well, that's an interesting one, because how valid is that research? Where's the research come from would be the question, because it can look very impressive, but it doesn't mean it's true. Are you accidentally finding AI play out into the realms of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation? And there's a big connection between those. And I don't mean Russian bot farms. I mean like literally the information that we're putting out as communicators. So to kind of close the loop, it's just really about saying, I have a clear vision for myself, and we have a clear vision for our organization for the role of AI. And that's a very simple guardrail in terms of what you do and don't do next. And then I think there's a big dose of agile that kind of comes with it. But it starts with your intention. And I think if you're clear about that, then it's clear.
Eric, will you embrace AI? I'll come to you, Raheen, after that.
That's very hilarious, because I was sitting here, I nearly killed Dustin, but I agree with Dustin in some things, and I disagree with him in some things. The first thing I agree with Dustin is that AI is important. We need policies around it, and it's important to start with the policy level. I also agree with him that AI, when you're using it, it's not supposed to be you're using it because you are lazy and you want to do your work. The point where Dustin and I separate is the issue of AI and research. There, I take the south, he takes the north route. What I feel is that AI is very important because it can work together with humans. And I feel that when I say that AI can work together with humans, I think they can work together for data analysis and insights. AI can process and analyze large volumes of data quickly, identify patterns and trends that humans might miss. So it's very important. It helps there. Also, AI really does help a lot when it comes to automation of routine tasks. It can help you handle repetitive tasks that are always there, and you free the workers to do something more creative, strategic, value added. When you look at AI and customer service and personalization, I think AI-powered algorithms can personalize user experiences, making it even better. AI is important for healthcare and diagnosis, and we can literally help as PR professionals in terms of how are we helping our non-governmental organization or medical team communicate this. So AI for me is very important in all sectors and all spheres, but the element of humans driving AI is very important, and not AI just being used as AI and then just using it because you're lazy and you want a quick fix done by an automated system. That is not how it should be. But I think we can use AI for scientific discovery, learning and education, predictive, analytical, and decision support. But humans should drive AI and not the other way around.
Let the human be in the driver's seat. Raheen.
I just actually wanted to add as well, just reiterating the importance of industry associations. So, because, for example, last week in Cote d'Ivoire, Bridget and Kwame hosted the most amazing interactive session on how to and what needs to go into an AI policy. So that was really, really valuable, where you have this network of people from across the continent sharing different views and ideas. PRCA Africa earlier this week hosted a fabulous session here in Cape Town on the different types of AI, what would work for what. So I think that just is so important to have those conversations, because I think it's new territory for everyone. There's so much and so many things happening on an hourly basis, daily basis, just to help each other to navigate through this. That's why it is so important to keep these conversations going.
Oh, I think we could have a session just on AI. In fact, I think the next webinar must just be AI driven to discuss the issues around that. I really do. There's so much. But I love this question from King Moyo. King Moyo is asking, how do you navigate the ethical lines in political space in Africa when representing a political party or politicians with so many unverified news flying around about them, or when you discover some ethical issues about them and you can't quit? And without generalizing or overgeneralizing here, the reality is that politics sometimes does lead to more spin than it does PR, and dare I say, a stretching of the truth. Is there anybody who wants to take that? Bridget. Dustin. Unmute yourself, Dustin.
I'm saying over to Bridget. It's fine. Bridget can do it.
No, go. Go first.
It's an interesting conversation. And for me, it begins with intent. And when you think about intent, you've got to start to the theory of issues of mis, dis, and malinformation. So what is misinformation? Misinformation is the sharing of fake news without intent. Disinformation is the sharing of fake news with intent. Malinformation is the sharing of fake news with the intent to do harm. And when you understand that and the differences between those things, it starts to give you a very cool and very clear measure around the guardrails of how organizations, not just political parties, by the way, do or don't conduct themselves. And I think it then again comes to the personal choice stuff. Do you stand up and speak up? And I think for many organizations, the ability to speak up has become almost too hard or too scary. And that's for people and companies, by the way. And the willingness of yourself to be able to do it. When and political parties are more likely to play into this space, or maybe I'm just jaundiced, but the reality is that you can very quickly assess the information against mis, dis, and mal information. And then I think it goes back to doing the right thing, which is respond to it, reject it, and replace it with the truth, or report it if you think it is that serious, or if it's that serious, go to the police. And I think, we have become viewers of our own lives like we don't have control over them. And actually, I think it's take back the control.
Believe it or not, we've got another AI question. Loth Makusa is saying, does AI require to align with ethics, or ethics is for humans only? And how does one, I imagine, teach a computer to be ethical, and is it something that can be programmed? I don't know the answer to that. Bridget, your view?
No, I just think from an ethical point of view, we are required by our WPP organization to inform our clients if we've used AI in any way with the preparation of any content, imagery, or whatever. And I think that's where it starts from an ethical point of view, is that from our personal and our business perspective, we are required to say we've used AI to do this. But I think that, we can teach our AI prompter to respond in the way that we want to do it. I think Eric's he speaks my language when he talks about how we can use AI to enhance what we do. It can, it's a starting point. It's a guardrail. It provides us with freedom to do the mundane, that it will do the mundane tasks. But I think, again, it's that human element that needs to rule what the machine and the technology is doing and saying. Your source, where is the information coming from? All that kind of information it's only us as human beings that can verify where the source of that information and how we use that information. So I think ethics still remains as a human intervention.
Babongile Zulu has a question for us. Babongile says, I'm not from a PR background. I work in publishing, but I'm still very interested in the industry. So please forgive me if this is a silly question. No such thing, Babongile. We welcome all questions on this platform. Do industry professionals undergo ethics training from time to time? And if so, how often? Regine.
They should. And that's also where that training opportunities come in. So that's definitely something that came through from the research as well. We asked the question with the PR landscape, what training do you need or would you like within the industry? And it came through very strongly. I just actually want to see if I can quickly find that specific stat. But it came through strongly that there is a need for ethics training. And I think with that information, associations and institutions can then make sure that that training is provided in that area. And I do think that there are different courses on it. And if there's a request for it coming through, for example, a PRCA or PRCA, most certainly then that will definitely be prioritized, because I think associations really, there's so much training that needs to happen, but it also doesn't help setting up something and no one attends it. So I think if there's a specific need, then it will definitely be prioritized, and definitely it needs to, you kind of think, should people be trained on ethics? Surely people will know what's right and wrong. But I think, again, it's just brushing up on, I think specifically, again, from that cross-cultural realm as well, to get to understand and respect different cultures of what's ethical and not ethical across the continent.
Bridget wants to add something.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that Code of Ethics is something that we all read and agree to when we become members of any professional body. And I think that the role of the professional body within the environment that we're working with, again, as I started off by saying, the role of the digital environment and the communications environment that we're working in, the role of that professional body now probably has a far greater role to play. And I think that it's not necessarily about training on ethics, but it's also, they should be the school principal when it comes to managing people that are unethical, ethical behavior. What are the guidelines and guardrails for ethical behavior within the PR industry? But if we're not, and it's not one element, it's not one training session, it's actually across everything that we're doing. It's how we conduct ourselves. It's how we deal with our different stakeholders, the tone that we use, the language that we use, the access to every element of our communication and our content. And I think that the role of the PRCA, for example, or the other professional bodies, is about making sure that they have rules, guidelines, and measures in place for their codes of ethics.
Just to add to that again, if I may, absolutely, Bridget, and I think just touching again also what you'd said earlier with that accountability. It's all good and well to have an ethics statement, but no one ever reads it. It's that kind of taking that that accountability for it afterwards. So, for example, now, I mean, I've shared the story with most people before of having been offered a brown envelope at the beginning of last year for a tender. And the fact is, when I went to go and look at that specific company's annual report, beautiful ethical state, the management, the leadership team have assigned to it, they assigned to this code of ethics. But it doesn't help just having it in word. It has to be in the behavior side of, and the leaders need to lead by example. And if they don't, I think what's really, really, really key is that there has to be so much stronger recourse for unethical behavior, because as Bridget, as you've mentioned, I mean, striking somebody off a role, I mean, if there's a name and shame, I'd you know, obviously from building mutually beneficial relationships, but you know, what is it? And perhaps that's also the next question that one could address at some point. What is that recourse for unethical behavior? Get that conversation going.
I'm conscious of time. We've got 7 minutes left, but two very interesting questions still to go. The first one is this is from Claire Jackson Bernardo. How do we as strategic communicators deal with the issue of a personal organization that has been very unethical publicly, but now wants to clean their reputation and wants a professional to help them do it? Arik, have you ever helped someone clean their reputation? Bridget, Dustin, Raheen, feel free to give us examples of a sanitized image. How have you sanitized someone's image, and is that even possible?
No, you can't put a clean shirt on a dead body and tell everybody it's coming to the party.
Can't people change their ways? Can people not change their ways and come clean and redeem themselves?
They can, but I would first question the intention. If your intention is to hire a communicator to tweet 140 characters to change the world's view of your behavior, you're probably asking the wrong thing of people. So we have a very simple rule: behavior is truth. So you can't communicate yourself into a bad reputation, and you sure as hell can't communicate yourself out of a bad reputation.
Arik,
that is
you sanitized. Sorry, Dustin. Apologies, Dustin. I thought you were done.
No, I'm just saying it's not the role of communicators. And yes, I could tell you a lot of stories, but maybe today is not the day.
Arik, has anyone ever paid you or tried to clean up their image and sanitize the old version of themselves?
Katie, well, no comment. However, I do believe in second chances. Second chances because everyone can make a change, or any brand can make a change. But as Dustin said, if you want that second chance, you must have changed your ways. You must have the demonstrated capability that you want to do better, you will do better. And so then I can come in and help you find ways of how do we start by doing better. And doing better sometimes starts with you acknowledging where you went wrong. And sometimes you have to acknowledge it in public so that they hold you accountable for the future.
The very last question we have is from Rukaya. Rukaya is asking, do you use a specific tool for AI for PR practitioners that adds value to your work? And is there a tool that you use that you would be happy to share today? Raheen?
Just having recently attended your PRCA Africa at the workshop on earlier this week, I think the most generally used one is ChatGPT. But I think what's really, really, really crucial is, and this was also mentioned at last week's conference by Bridget specifically, was the quality you put in is the quality you'll get out. ChatGPT isn't going to miraculously improve your writing. You need to tell it what you need, but there's different types of AI tools for different things. But I think with the paid ChatGPT side of things as well, which can create images, I think it's about $20 a month for most of the general AI tools out there, that is the one that I think was also confirmed earlier in the week, used by most PR agencies.
Eric, are you using a specific tool?
Yes, for my 8 to 5 job, I do use specific tools with regards to AI, but I would add on to what Raheen said. ChatGPT also is one of the nice tools I use. The others, I think, in another session, if you invite me, I'll be able to come and explain them, and they're more interesting than ChatGPT.
Dustin, Bridget, any
Yeah,
tools? that
we've our online platform is governed by a WPP organization. It's based on ChatGPT, but it's not the platform that would be open to everybody. It has certain limitations that it reduces a lot of error and miscommunication as a result of how the WPP organization have structured our online tool.
Dustin?
I would just say Midjourney, and it's only as a complementary source actually, and not in traditional PR, but for example, you're storyboarding a creative concept, or you are producing animated content or a motion graphic, and you need to kind of put it together. It's a nice tool to be able to help clients visualize. It's not going to do the job for you. It's absolutely a complementary tool, and we found a lot of value in there.
I have found today's session so helpful. I hope you have too. Any last comments before we close off? Raheen, I'll start with you. Do you have any closing comments?
I think just thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel. And I think just to be a lot more mindful of the importance of research out there, having that as the base, and then also just really cementing one's own personal values, because that is going to attract the people that you are going to be doing work with. So
thank you very much. Eric?
It starts with you. If you want to see a better ethical world, start with you. If you want to see more integrity, start with you. Then influence people around you.
Bridget?
I echo what Eric says. Panelists have actually spoken a lot about personal integrity and values. Those guardrails and those guidelines, it's all up to us in short and sweet terms.
Dustin?
100% the same point, actually. It starts with you.
There we go. It starts with you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. The state of ethics in the public relations industry in Africa. Dustin Chick, Bridget van Holt, Eric Karani, and Raheen Leroux. I thank you for your time, and I especially thank all of our guests today who've joined us, all of our participants who've joined us for the sending in of your very, very interesting questions. It's been great to have you here with us today, and we hope you found this of value, and we hope you found it helpful. Until our next seminar from the PRCA and me, Katie Katapodis, thank you so much for joining us this Friday afternoon. Happy weekend to everybody.
Thank you.